Hi, Scott. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks, Fauzi. Sorry,
Fazia. Yeah, it's
I want to
Fazia.
say that correctly. Fazia.
Yes.
Okay, great. Should we start that
Yeah.
again? Sorry about that.
No worries. No
Now we'll
worries.
prepare that we haven't. We'll pretend we haven't had two conversations.
There we go. So, so basically, when we start the recording, it's just to show listeners who want to go and see more about behind the scenes. So, I think they have a different image in their head of what it might look like for us to do this interview.
Okay.
So obviously we're on Zoom. We are not in the same room, but Matt, my producer, he's going to come on in about 5-6 minutes, and he's going to do a sound check.
Okay.
Make sure our audio is working well. He will also send some information in the chat. In the chat, he'll do a countdown. So it'll be 4, 3, 2, 1, and then 30 seconds. So when you see the 2-minute mark, that's about when we'll wrap things up. I'll ask you to maybe give your website, however.
Very good. Thank you.
You know, that information. Absolutely. And then I will talk a little bit about how people can reach out to me. And then we're going to go to break. When we come back from the break, we will continue our interview. So I have your questions. I did add a couple. I did kind of shift it a little bit. I don't want it to be, and I know you're a pastor, but I don't want it to be about religion, because I think the information that you are going to provide is very valuable. And I don't want somebody getting turned off by it, because if they're Jewish or if they're some other religion, I don't want them to think, no, this is a religious show, because that's not what I promote. I don't promote religion, but I do promote ways to help people feel successful. And I'm very comfortable with spirituality. I'm very comfortable with talking about different viewpoints, but I don't want it to just be that one viewpoint. Now, one of the things that I noticed in your notes is that we talk about a book that you've written, but I have no idea what that book is because it's not listed anywhere. What is the name of your book?
I have one that came out last month, Your Finances God's Way. And then I had another one that came out last year, Your Marriage God's Way. And so I'm guessing it's one of those two. I have books before that as well, but I'm guessing it's one of those two. So probably the finance one, Your Finances would probably, God's Way would probably be the better one.
What's the other one?
Your Marriage God's Way.
Marriage. Okay. We can promote both books. Great. We'll just focus on the first one. Your Finances God's Way. And then what I'd like to do is, when we start off, is we'll talk a little bit about you. I'm going to give the brief bio that you sent me, and then I'm going to introduce you. And then I want you to tell me a little bit more about you. Maybe for some people, they're comfortable talking about their families and where they're from and how they their journey, basically, of how they got to where they're at. But it's up to you how much you want to share. This is going to be a live radio show. It does broadcast internationally. So keep that in mind. And also people will be able to get it in podcast form as well. So you can promote it. So keep that in mind as you're answering questions, as you're talking. How do you want this to be when you replay it? Yes. The replay. So, what information do you really want to get out? What are the, most important things? And as we go through the questions, we may deviate a little bit. I may have additional questions. I like this to be a conversation. So I'll ask you questions, and I may have additional questions on that one particular topic. I try to put myself in the perspective of the listener. What would I want to know if I was listening to this particular show? What information would I want to have access to? There is a potential for callers. I don't really promote it as much as I used to. There was a time when we did have a few callers. It did not go over very well. Sometimes callers give too much personal information, and then it kind of makes the podcast not usable, because we don't want their personal information out there.
Okay.
So like I said, it may or may not happen. But if it does, we'll just ask the caller not to give personal information. We don't want to know more than their first name. We don't want to know where they live. We don't want to know their spouse's name, their kids' names, nothing like that. So just for that sake. So we have about 2 minutes, and I'm hoping Matt hasn't forgotten about me.
And how long does the interview last?
Full hour. You will have a full hour. So feel free to talk as much as you want. Give stories. Do you have stories that you can share? So, feel free to talk about whatever story that comes to mind. I'm very fascinated by stories, because I think
people can relate to them.
People can relate to them, and they can identify. And if somebody else can do it, well, then maybe I can too. But sometimes when we hear information in its entirety, it's hard to wrap our minds around how we can do that.
Okay.
All right. Well, we will be going on the show live soon, but here's Matt. Okay. It's making me nervous today. He normally doesn't wait this long.
No problem.
And how do you pronounce your last name?
LaPierre. Just LaPierre. Pierre with law in front of it. Yeah, LaPierre. That was perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, Fozzie. How you doing? This is Matt.
Hey, Matt. I'm glad you're here. I was getting worried. I would like you to meet Scott LaPierre. Scott, this is my wonderful, usually much earlier producer, Matt.
Hi,
you almost gave me a heart attack today.
Good. Hi, Matt. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Good. All right. Just do a quick sound check. I think you're both sounding good, but just to check the levels. Scott, do me a favor, count back from 5 for me one time.
Sure. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Test.
All right.
Test.
All right. Good. Sounded good. Good levels. Fozzie, go ahead.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right. Perfect. Yep. Both sounded good. So no adjustments needed. And I did send a hello over on the chat. Did that come through?
I did get that. And Scott, did you get the chat?
Yes.
All right.
All right. Perfect. Then we are good to go. We still have about a minute and 20 until we get started.
All right. Thanks. Bye. Yeah, no, Matt's an awesome guy. He does such a good job.
Great.
Appreciate that.
Oh, you can still hear me. You're welcome.
That's why it's not good to talk bad about people. You never...
I would never do that anyway. Figure if you don't have something nice to say, you just don't say it.
So your name's Fozia, not Fozzie? Or Fozia?
Yeah, Fozia.
Fozia. Yeah. Okay, very good.
And also, like, if you need to cough or something, just press the mute button.
Very good.
So.
Should I be muted when I'm not talking or no?
No.
Okay.
All right, we've got about 15 seconds here till the open. I'm going to send some feed your way. Have a good show.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Just sit up straight. Your voice will project further.
Welcome to Focus on Success with Fozzie Acosti. Our program is designed to help you with executive function challenges. Our guest experts offer perspective, experience, and ideas to improve different aspects of your life. Now, here is your host, Fozzie Acosti.
Hi, welcome. And before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to all our international listeners in China and the Netherlands and in Scotland and New Zealand, wherever you're at. Thank you for listening. Without you, this would not be possible. And today we have a very different topic that we're going to talk about. We have Scott LaPierre, and we are going to talk about finances. So let's talk a little bit about Scott. He is a teaching pastor of Woodland Christian Church in Woodland, Washington. He's an author, and a conference speaker. He holds a master's in biblical studies from Liberty University. Scott and his wonderful wife, Katie, have 9 children, and they are very passionate homeschoolers, and they advocate for homeschooling. Scott is a former school teacher and an Army officer. So welcome to the show, Scott. I'm really looking forward to talking to you about finances.
Yes, thank you, Fozzie. I'm really glad to be here.
You know, I'm excited to hear your perspective, because I know you have kind of this theological perspective that that you bring to the table. So let's talk a little bit more about you. Everyone has a journey that they take. Everyone has a story. What's your story? How did you get to where you're at today?
Good. So I grew up in Northern California. My wife and I grew up together, and I really enjoyed, even when I was in school coaching, I was involved in sports, and I enjoyed coaching some of the younger teams, which was kind of set me up to enjoy teaching when I got older and continuing coaching. And like you said, I was an officer in the military, which also involves an amount of teaching and leadership and training and so forth.
Sure.
And then when I got out of the military, that's when I began teaching elementary school. So I went college, military, and then teaching and coaching. And during that time, I became a Christian and found the same passion for teaching and instructing, but I really want to be teaching people the Bible versus telling people to open their Bibles versus just telling kids to open their math and science books. Although I did definitely enjoy being an elementary school teacher. And so as a teaching pastor, I just like it sounds, I do most of the teaching or preaching for the church. We have another pastor or other elders who help with more of the counseling and discipling. And kind of in the world of pastoring or preaching, you might have a couple different approaches to preaching, where some people kind of have some pastors just sort of have abbreviated notes of what they're going to say, just a phrase to jar their memory, and they kind of get up there and I don't want to say wing it, but it might be a little more off the cuff. And then another approach would be writing out your notes pretty thoroughly. And I'm in that category of writing out my notes very thoroughly. And so I go up there almost with like a manuscript. I don't have to read it. I think it's extemporaneous, but because I've been working on that manuscript all week, I'm very familiar with it by the time I preach it. And so I'd end up with these very polished and refined manuscripts. And my wife was frequently telling me, hey, you really should turn some of these into books someday. And so my most recent book that was published last month is Your Finances God's Way. There's a biblical guide to making the best use of your money. And there's an accompanying workbook. And that's largely drawn from the sermons that I preached at my church. So there's a lot of practical instruction and so forth relating to managing our money or being good stewards, but also a lot that's drawn from scripture, drawn from God's word. And again, and we have 9 children too, like you said. So we got married.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Some people like, yeah, that's a response that's kind of my response too, to be honest with you. I was heading to work this morning, and my kids keep, coming up to the door to say goodbye and give me a kiss and so forth. And
just keep going.
Yeah, there's this one day I looked at this. It's funny. I looked at this family photo of these people, and they had. I was like, wow, they sure have a lot of kids, and they had 7 kids. And I was like, I can't believe that I have more kids than that, So
wow.
My wife and I got married. We just had the conviction to let God, give us what he wanted to give us when he wanted to give it to us, and and not a commentary on what other people should or shouldn't do. And, he could have given us 3 or 4 kids. It's been 9. My wife turned 40 last year, so we don't know if we'll have any more. We'll feel blessed if we do, but maybe this is it. But yeah, just wanted God to basically build our family for us and have his fingerprints on it.
So yeah, thank you for sharing your story. I think it's wonderful that you and your wife have known each other for so long. It gives that depth to your relationship, and you have this wonderful foundation. So my question to you is, why finances? What is it, how did finances come into your view to allow you to share your expertise with others?
Yeah, that's a great question. And interestingly, as a pastor, people could come into church and say, hey, we're going to, because I told you the book was drawn from my sermons. And so people could come in and say, hey, I thought we're going to be listening to sermons on something spiritual, like prayer or forgiveness or worship or love or any number of things that they see kind of more spiritually than finances. But
Sure.
really, it should be God's word that determines for us what is spiritual, and the frequency something occurs in scripture would indicate what is more or less spiritual in a sense. So if something comes up frequently, that tells you it's important to God. He wants it to be important to us. And there are a few topics in scripture that come up as frequently as finances do. And so because of that, I see finances as a major topic. If I'm going to preach the Bible, then I better be preaching finances. That's one reason. And the second reason is, as a pastor, you really want to know your congregation, spend time with these people, love them, be familiar with their lives. And one of the most common topics that comes up in conversations or in counseling is finances. It's something that everyone, can relate to. If someone can come and they can talk to me about struggling with anger, or someone else can have a parenting question, or someone else can be dealing, with pride or covetousness. But everyone deals with finances because everyone has to make money, spend money. And so it's just applicable to everyone's lives inside the church and outside the church.
Yeah, we really just can't get away with not dealing with money. You're right. Mm-hmm. So tell me, like how did you become an expert on finances?
Good. Well, it's always been a point of interest for me. I can remember when I was a kid having some money saved up and putting it in a CD, reading a book on stocks and investments from like the youngest age. I went into business, or I was a business major in college. I really enjoyed my finance and investing classes and banking classes that I took. And so I've always just been interested in money. Not, I wouldn't say that I really had a strong desire to be rich or anything, but I wanted to be able to, hopefully not have to kill myself working and still have enough money to take care of my family. So it was always a passion of mine. I've always found investing interesting. And so I was studying it, reading it, learning about it, investing myself, making some mistakes. And then after I became a Christian, seeing that God's word talked a lot about money. And so that's how I developed so much familiarity. And then counseling, seeing what works for people, what doesn't, what are the most common problems that people deal with. I really think that anyone that wants to be, I believe you said the word expert or professional on a topic, should have interaction with people and see what people are dealing with and experiencing. I mean, that's you can read books and that's great. And you definitely should, or you can go to school, but and that's why most professions, there's a point at which you learn, but then you start dealing with people, right? Lawyers, doctors, dentists, they start to learn the profession, they're dealing with people. And so it was really beneficial for me to be dealing with people regarding their finances.
So let's talk a little bit about the book. Tell me about the process that you talk about in the book. Tell me a little bit about how people should manage their money. And is this a way that, is this a process you follow personally? Is this your process?
Yeah. So for any of your listeners that might ever think about writing books or publishing books, I'll tell you that if you're looking for a publisher, then one of the first things they're going to ask you is, and I am getting to answer your question, thanks for your patience while I give kind of a roundabout answer.
Sure.
A publisher is going to ask you what separates your book apart from all the other books on this topic. I mean, obviously there's lots of other finance books. There's plenty of other names that come to mind. And so a publisher wants to know, why would people buy your book versus Ron Blue or versus Dave Ramsey or Larry Burkett? When I wrote my marriage book, Your Marriage God's Way, the question is, why would people want to buy your marriage book versus these other ones? What sets it apart? There's hundreds or thousands of marriage books out there. And so I had to answer that with my marriage book and with my finance book. And one of the things I think that made me more credible was my life, that I was a school teacher, which most people know school teachers don't make tons of money. And then I was a pastor, and pastors obviously don't make a lot of money. And we have 9 kids, and most people don't have 9 kids. And so to take care of 9 kids on a single income teacher's salary and then pastor's salary and homeschool them, I think it was like, well, this guy probably knows what he's talking about, or else he wouldn't be able to, put food on the table. And so we definitely follow it. There's a lot in my book, and this would apply whether you're a Christian or not, about sacrifice and self-control and being patient. I mean, you could be a Christian or non-Christian, you could be rich or you can be poor, but if you don't have self-control and you don't have patience, your money's not going to last long. I mean, there's people that do make a lot of money, but you wouldn't know they make a lot of money because they lack self-control and wisdom with their finances, so their money doesn't go very far.
That is a very true statement. Yeah, I definitely see that a lot. My aunt, when she was younger, she loved to buy things. And I think when she was in college, she realized she didn't have the finances to buy everything she wanted. So one of the things that she did was she would look at something and say, I love this mug, but do I need this mug? Would my life be okay without this mug? And if she could answer certain questions, then that would help her make that decision whether or not she would make the purchase. And I thought that was great that she put that patience into there, that thought process into there, and really made a conscious decision on whether or not the purchase needed to be made. So I thought that was fascinating. You've written about most people have a spending problem versus an income problem. And we talked a little bit about that, but tell me more about what that means. And let's talk a little bit about what are the biggest spending problems people have.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And this came from counseling, being surprised that people who were coming in had a considerable amount of money, in my mind, often more than me. And they were having trouble seeing where all of it was going, why they didn't have enough money at the end of the month. And you kind of, and so I tell people, if I meet with them about finances, I say, you need to come in, bring the last 3 months of your budget or your spending and income, so we can take a look at it and seeing, intuitively. So I've kind of swung on this pendulum. I used to kind of expect people are going to come in and they just don't make much money. And that's the problem. But then over time, just seeing, no, people often have a good amount of money. So they don't have an income problem, they have spending problems. And I know you have this international audience, and so I want to be sensitive to them, but I will say for your listeners who are in the United States and some of the wealthier countries, these are people that, if you're in the United States, you're not just the wealthiest people in the world, you're the wealthiest people throughout all of human history. I mean, most Americans enjoy a level of extravagance or lifestyle that's unparalleled throughout the rest of the world and throughout human history. And so when I'm dealing with Americans who tell me, well, I don't make enough money, which is what most people will say, you want to be candid with them and say, actually, you're pretty much extravagant or rich compared to a lot of other people. And so it's an issue of, go ahead, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to say a lot of people live like kings and they don't really realize that is a very true statement. There are kings in other countries that do not live as well as some just average people here in the United States.
Yeah, the poverty level in the United States, interestingly, for many people who are below it, are still enjoying a lifestyle that is better than most people throughout the rest of the world and pretty much everyone throughout human history. People who are considered below the poverty line are still able to enjoy many things that are considered luxuries to others. So whether it's cell phones, whether it's televisions, whether it's computers. And so
agreed, absolutely.
And so because most of my ministry is to my church or to Americans, and then I point out that you typically have a spending problem or spending problems versus income problems. And if you want to talk about what exactly those spending problems are, one of the first ones I noticed quickly is small purchases that people make. And there's a reason it's really easy to lose money or have a spending problem associated with small purchases that add up, because it's very easy to just say well, it's $10 or $20 or
it's just coffee.
That's exactly right.
I think most people spend a lot of money on coffee,
Yeah. If you,
we won't mention the stores they go to, but they do. They spend a lot of money on coffee.
Yeah, and that's actually what the main example, or the premier example I give in my book, that the individual who stops to get coffee 5 days per week, over about 5 years has spent $7,000 on coffee. And that's kind of shocking to people, but it really adds up. And so if you let's just say this guy's name is Brian, and Brian is, stopping to get coffee on the way to work each day. And he does this for those years. And then he tells his friend, that he works with, hey, we should make more money. We don't make enough money here. The boss should pay me more. Basically, I don't have a spending problem. I have an income problem. And if you kind of push back against Brian and say, what about all this money, you're spending on coffee? What will he say? He'll say, well, it's just $5, or, it's just $20 or $25 over the course of the week, not recognizing how much it adds up over time. And then, and obviously, Fozzie, that's just coffee. This isn't adding in the Netflix subscriptions, the extra items we buy at the store. We're planning to go to the store just to buy this, and we pick up all these other items. It's the times that we eat out or go to the movies, and And I think I wonder if I could find it in here, but the main movie chain, AMC Entertainment, it's America's most popular movie theater chain. So I'm using their prices. The average movie costs $26 per person, $11 for the ticket, $6 soda, $9 popcorn. So that's over $50 for a couple. As soon as you start adding kids, especially if we try to do that, you're looking at quickly being over, $100 for just 2 kids. And so I don't think that can really be justified when there's, and we're not really big on movies, but that can't be justified when there's Netflix or a movie rental or something that's only going to be a few bucks. And so all of those things just, really add up over time. So that's the first spending problem people have, small purchases that add up. The second spending problem that we have is worthless purchases. And by worthless, I think it's really important that I define that word. And if I'm talking too much or anything, just let me know or raise your hand.
Oh, no,
object or something.
Feel free.
Okay. So when I say worthless, I mean worthless to the person. I don't mean the item itself is worthless, because what's worthless to someone can be very valuable or beneficial to someone else. Sure. So I'm talking about purchases that are worthless to the person that bought it. And the way we determine that is by thinking about what benefit this item had for the purchaser or the buyer sometime down the road. And so if you buy something, even if it's incredibly interesting, valuable, beneficial to others, but you never use it, or it sits in the corner or in the garage or in the shed or in that storage shed for weeks, months, years, then that was a worthless purchase for you. And so it's really just defining what benefit purchases have for us. And I think most of us know, whether it's extra clothes or shoes or items or tools that we bought, they're worthless in that we never did anything with them.
I always think of kids' toys. People take their kids to Target and they get those last minute little tiny toys. Mm-hmm. Well, by the time they've come home, they've already thrown it away.
Yeah, I share a story in my book, and you'd asked me to share some stories. So I'll share this.
Yeah, please.
This one right here. So when I was an elementary school teacher, I had become a Christian, and so I took a considerable interest in my students' character. So I didn't want to just teach academics. I wanted to also teach morality and integrity and so forth, and honesty and responsibility. And so the one time every year, or times each year, when I would have the opportunity to teach my students, because I taught 4th and 5th grade, so it wasn't like high school where I could go teach, banking or something like that. I'm dealing with these 4th and 5th graders, and the main opportunities I had each year to talk to them about finances occurred when we went on field trips. And so I saw it happen every year, and I would tell my students, I'd say, today you came to school differently than every other year. Your parents gave you money for the field trip. You're sitting in here and you're all excited because you got this 20, 30, 40, $50, I don't know how much in your pockets. And I'm going to tell you what not to do. And I'm going to tell you what many students in the past have done, even though I've given them the same speech. And I'll say, you're going to go there and there's going to be a tourist shop, or like a souvenir. That's the word I was looking for, a souvenir shop. Everything's going to look very fancy and sparkly and shiny for you. And you're going to want to go and spend your money there. And I'm telling you that you're going to buy that souvenir, and you're not even going to get home tonight before you're tired of it. And the reason that I recognize this is because when we drive back to the school on the bus, and then you get off the bus and you make sure all the students get off the bus, and then you kind of walk up and down the aisle and look in the seats to make sure that the kids didn't leave backpacks or watches or wallets or things like that. And most of those seats were a little littered with what? Just the things
they just bought. Yeah,
the stuff they bought at the souvenir shop. And so the point is, you don't leave something that's incredibly valuable to you, at least not deliberately. You leave the things you're bored of, that you no longer have interest in, and they're leaving these things on the seats. And I would tell the students, hey, you're going to buy this, and then you're just not even going to care about it a few hours later. And kids can do that with toys, and it's very easy for us, and we should recognize kids do that in our parenting to help prevent our kids from doing that. But we should recognize that the same thing happens with adults.
Absolutely.
If we buy something that, we're at Target or Walmart, and those extra items and we don't use them, then we're making that same mistake. And so that's one of the second things I saw was worthless purchases that add up. I mean, if you think of all the thousands of dollars we could probably save if we didn't purchase things that we don't use, it'd be a lot of money. And interestingly, are you aware of one of the fastest growing industries, at least in the United States? It's warehouses. it's self-storage warehouses, I should have said.
Oh, where people store their things. Yeah. I did not know that. That's fascinating to me. As you were talking though, I was thinking about how when my kids were little, I would hang out with other parents and their kids would always buy things, or their logic was, well, we can't find your red shirt, so let's just get you another one, or we can't find. And what would happen is they would just end up with so much stuff that they couldn't find anything because they had so much stuff. So they would just go buy more stuff.
Oh, and, wow.
And I remember my daughter wanted to do something similar when she was about 6 or 7. And my mom she was with my parents, and my parents said to her, if you buy everything you want, you're going to end up living in a warehouse. You have to be particular about the things you purchase. So yeah. So what are you trying to say, that people are just storing things in their warehouses?
I think that's a fantastic point that you just made. I hadn't even thought about that. And I'm almost thinking like, boy, I wish I would have put that in my book. Maybe if I do another edition, I'll add that. But you're right. Yeah. What happens is you end up, well, there's studies they've done on the anxiety that's caused by clutter and and messiness. And you kind of feel it, you feel peace when your house is orderly and organized, and you feel anxiety when you walk in and there's stuff everywhere and clutter. And so that's one of the other downsides to, and then the problem is, like you said, I mean, I feel like I'm just repeating what you said, but when you can't find something, then you're like, okay, well, I'll just go buy something new, which then
t-shirt is only $10, or it that's the mindset. It's only, as if it's okay to buy it twice because you couldn't find it. But the problem is, why can't you find it?
And then that adds to greater clutter. When I read this article, it was titled, Self-Storage, How Warehouses for Personal Junk Became a $38 billion industry. And it says, despite recessions, demographic shifts, few building types have boomed like self-storage lockers. The self-storage industry made $33 billion in 2016, nearly 3 times Hollywood's box office gross. Self-storage has seen an 8% annual growth since 2018 and now employs almost 100,000 people nationwide. 1 in 11 Americans pay an average of $92 per month to use self-storage. So that's almost $100 per month people are paying for storage, for stuff to store stuff that they don't use and have probably forgotten about and don't, so.
Is it because they're buying too much, and they just have nowhere to put it? Or is it because they're downsizing? Like, I've noticed quite a few people over the last few years have downsized, and they feel like this downsizing is temporary. So what they do is they take their things and they put it in a storage locker.
Well, I think if that's the case, and I do think there are people doing that, and I do think that's a good approach to, we actually, you want another story? I'll share another story here with you briefly. So we've been really close with my parents. They became Christians soon after I did. I was able to baptize them, and they came up, they left, we were in California. They moved to Washington with us. And then my dad passed away unexpectedly last year. And my mom was, thank you. My mom was really lonely. I'd go over to see her at night because they lived pretty close to us. And I told Katie, I said, hey, mom's been struggling since dad passed. What do you think about her maybe moving in with us? And we expect we'd probably take care of her in the future anyway. And so, yeah, she moved in with us. She was lonely before, but she's not lonely now, living in a house with 9 kids. And so we had to sell our house and then we started renting a house while we looked for a house that we could move into. But the thing is, as you can, probably guess, Fazia, is people don't want to rent to someone with 9 kids and 3 adults. And my mom has a little dog. And so we were only able to find this house that was 4,500 square feet, which is, incredibly large. Even for our family, it was just like so much space, I could lose my kids and where are they up there, And so we rented that house. And then last week was when we just moved into our new house, which
congratulations.
Thank you. And there's a in-law quarters for my mom. But what I was going to say was we're actually enjoying the smaller house more because it's easier to just not have stuff spread out everywhere, and we're closer as a family. And so downsizing, there are advantages. It's interesting. I thought, how are we going to go from 4,500 square feet? Our living quarters, I guess, is like 2,800 square feet. So about, 3 kids per bedroom. So it's not super, close quarters or anything, but it's a lot smaller than the other house, but we're enjoying it more. And then my mom has her own area. And so, but the thing is, when it was that big, it was just like, it was nice to downsize. It was nice to not have to keep track of as much and have as much to clean and organize. So.
Yeah, I think, I think definitely having, there's a certain level of space that gives you a feeling of comfort, of coziness.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had a similar year to yours where my dad passed away last year. And so my mom had some health issues. And so actually we went from Arizona to Florida and then eventually ended up in Virginia because she fell a few times and injured herself and she can no longer drive. And so we actually moved in together here in Virginia. And so, but we have, I think we have around 3,000 square feet for the two of us, but we don't even use our second story. So it's basically become the guest quarters, which is nice for when people come over. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely nice to have, a space that makes you feel cozy and at home. So we are wrapping things up before the commercial. I would love for you to give your information on how someone can get a copy of your book, Your Finances God's Way, as well as Your Marriage God's Way. How can someone get in touch with you, or how can they get a copy of your book?
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. So yeah, my book is Your Finances God's Way, a biblical guide to making the best use of your money. And there's an accompanying workbook. And then Your Marriage God's Way, a biblical guide to a Christ-centered relationship. And those are available on, Amazon, and lots of people shop there. Barnes & Noble, Christian Book, pretty much wherever books are sold, you can find the books there. If people want to find out more about me personally, my website is my name, scottlapierre.org. And so maybe if you put that in the show notes, or I know it's live right now, but
we'll do a banner with your information, and we will put the link to your either your website or Amazon where they can get a copy of the book. So maybe your website will be better.
Yeah, my website, scottlapierre.org. Then people can reach out to me if they have questions. And that's kind of the hub. From there, they can find information about my books, my sermons, Perfect. My conferences. So that's just my name, scottlapierre.org. And I love to hear from people. And I have a free gift there too, on a little marriage booklet for people as well.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can go to executivefunctioncoachaz.com. And on my website, you can see podcasts from this show. You can also go to our YouTube channel and see the behind the scenes version of our show today. You can subscribe to our magazine, Executive Function Magazine, and we hope that you will, because we have our third issue coming out July 10th. So if you'd like to see that in your inbox, feel free to go and subscribe. And if you are interested in being on the show, or you want to write for the magazine, feel free to contact me. My direct number is 480-648-1122. And we will be back after these messages.
Okay, great. All clear. Back in a couple minutes.
How long is the break? Like 3 minutes or 5 minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay.
I think it's like 2 minutes. Yeah.
How was that first half? Did I talk too much, or was that a good?
No, it was, yeah, you were fine. You were fantastic. I appreciate that. There is no right or wrong. We just go with it, and whatever works.
Okay. I do have one other spending problem, if you want to continue on that, just about self-entitlement, feeling like we deserve something. So if that's...
Ooh, I like that one. Okay. Yeah, I was actually having a conversation with my mom about that.
Actually, two more. I have that one, and then one about impatience. Like I need it right now.
Okay, I wrote those down. So we'll talk about those, and then what we'll do is talk about ways. You had talked about how to handle money in a more spiritual way, advice, and then we can just talk about debt and just mingle some stories in with that as we start. Perfect. Yeah, no, this is great. Thank you for sharing all this.
All right. I'm trying to share things that are beneficial to Christians and non-Christians.
Yeah. Thank you.
So this is live right now. I wish I would have known. I would have shared it.
I sent you a copy of the e-card. So the e-card is what we put together for our promotional things. So you can still send it out, because what you can do is send it out in an email to everybody, and they can go listen to the podcast. They can also go to they can go to my website and they can listen to the podcast. They can also go to the YouTube channel and see the behind the scenes. The behind the scenes will probably take a couple days to go up. My editor likes to look through everything and make sure it's perfect.
Great.
And she'll probably be looking at this, so we'll give her the time to do that. And then so it'll be up there shortly. Yeah. And then
when did you email that card to me? I don't.
I think it was Sunday.
Sunday. Okay.
Yeah. If you don't have it, I can send it to you again.
Okay, please do. Yeah, I would like to send that out and share that.
Okay.
On social media too.
Absolutely. The more you promote it, the better.
Yeah.
And then we'll promote it intermittently as well over the next week on our social media. So you'll also get a little banner for a month on your on our page for the radio show. And if you're then the YouTube channel. And then after our show, I'll send you the link to the podcast. And then my executive producer, Tacey Trump, will send you the embedded link, and you can put that on your website.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
And then you'll get another email from our marketing and outreach coordinator. Her name is Nicole, and Nicole will discuss options for you in ways we can help promote you further.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks. Yeah, and I definitely I understand it's mutually beneficial. So, I mean, if you have my website link in there, the more places, that helps SEO for my site and helps your show. So I'll have it all over my social media, put it in my newsletter, do whatever I can. So
perfect.
All right, we are just about to come back. So bye.
All right, thanks, Matt.
You are listening to Focus on Success. To reach Fozzie Acosti or her guest on the live show, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. You may also send an email to fozia@executivefunctioncoachaz.com. Now, back to Focus on Success.
Hi, welcome back. I'm Fozzie Acosti, and today we are speaking with Scott LaPierre. He has written a book called Your Finances God's Way, and today we are talking to him about finances. So welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Fozzie. I'm glad to be here with you and your listeners.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you. And so we took a break, and we're still in the middle of a conversation when we took the breaks. I'd like to revisit that a little bit. One of the things that we did not talk about was self-entitlement and impatience. And I know that that's a topic that you would really like to address. So let's go ahead and start with self-entitlement. How does that impact finances?
Good. Yeah. So we were, it's part of a larger discussion about us having spending problems, or what our spending problems typically result from, at least for American listeners and some other listeners that might be in wealthier parts of the world, because I know you have an international audience. Most
Sure.
people have spending problems versus an income problem. And even people that might, aren't even nearly as wealthy as the United States can still have spending problems. I mean, you don't have to make a lot of money to have spending problems. You can make any amount of money and not be as wise with your finances as you should. And one of the things that I've noticed that can cause the most amount of trouble for people is self-entitlement. And that's simply that attitude of, I deserve this, I should have this. And I'm not saying that people can't reward themselves. In fact, I would say, and I don't know if we'll talk about debt, but if you're paying off debt, or you have some major accomplishment, pay off your house or this credit card or these school loans or something like that, that can be a nice time to reward yourself. Hopefully not reward yourself so lavishly that you put yourself in greater debt, but it can be nice, especially if you get your family involved, your kids, and you say, hey, once we pay this off, we're going to plan a trip and we're going to go here. And so I'm not denying the benefit of having a goal or an incentive that when you reach, you can reward yourself. But sometimes that entitlement can cause problems when people say, I went through this bad situation, or this person mistreated me, or this bad thing happened in my life, and so I deserve this. I should have this. I've worked really hard this week. I was talking to this gentleman, and I knew his family was struggling financially. And one of the ways we like to care for our congregation is if we think people are struggling financially, then we give back to them and help them. We've had, some families struggle during COVID. And so we've cut checks for people, for thousands of dollars at times. And when the father was the main breadwinner and he couldn't work, or when medical bills were piling up. And so we were entertaining giving some money to this gentleman. And I think every family except for this one, we've given money to. So you want to be a good steward of God's money. I mean, people give this money to the church. They expect it to be handled appropriately, handled wisely. So we can't just give money to everyone. Sometimes what people need instead of money is they need to listen to your podcast. They need, to read a finance book. What they don't need more money. What they need is more wisdom. They need more knowledge so that they can handle their finances well. And one of the worst things you can do is take people who have bad financial practices and give them more money, because that just gives them more money to make bad choices with. And so the best thing you can do is teach them or train them to handle their money well, which is why we do this amount of investigating. And so this gentleman we understood was struggling, and I started to talk to him, and someone had just mentioned to me, him going out to the movies without, I think and I found out by himself without his family. And so, and I'm not saying people can't go out to the movies, and I'm not saying that everyone that goes out to the movies has to, bring their wife and their kids. To me, to be honest, it was a little bizarre. This guy that's leaving his wife at home with, the kids while he's out. She's probably exhausted from being with these kids all day, and so I thought, maybe it'd be better if he went with her, or even sent her someplace, to relax. But after pressing him, we found out it was kind of a he'd done this multiple times, and then it was better to. And when I asked him to get around, go back to the beginning of why I was sharing this, it had to do with him saying, I deserve this. I worked hard at work. I had this, 50-hour, I think maybe even said 60-hour work week. And so I deserved it. And my thought was, well, if you worked 50 or 60 hours, that's a lot of time away from your family. Maybe the better thing would be, because if you're at work 50, 60 hours, when does your family see you? And then to come home and then to go out to the movies each week. I didn't think that was a very wise approach. But it came out when I pressed him about it. He said, I deserve it. And so entitlement can really be problematic. We knew some people that had purchased a vehicle. They had a vehicle that worked completely fine for them. And the wife went out and she bought this new vehicle, and it really put the family in a difficult place financially. But her thought was I deserve this. I've worked hard taking care of our house and our kids and stuff. And so that entitlement mentality can be very problematic, increase debt, create a lot more stress. So, when you say I deserve this, or I've earned it, and you buy it, then there's a little bit of relief and joy that comes with that purchase. But when you consider the anxiety and stress that's caused over the coming months, or perhaps even years, paying off the debt from that, it's definitely not worth it.
Well, it has a lot to do with, perspective and modeling behavior for your family and kids. And, that sense of entitlement, I think, gives you a reward that's short-lived.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's
and
well
they're
said.
not really thinking about the consequences long-term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if it's thousands of dollars of debt you're introducing into your family or into your lives. How long is that immediate joy or happiness associated with that purchase worth all the years trying to pay that off? It definitely isn't. And then the fourth spending problem that I've seen is impatience. People have spending problems because they're impatient. Many of the bad choices that we make financially could have been avoided if we were more patient. So one study, or one story, which is a study that I'll share with your listeners. Or have you heard of the Stanford marshmallow experiment before, by chance?
No, I have not.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds
I'm
pretty
hoping
comical.
you'll explain it.
Yeah. So Stanford conducted this. I think it's somewhat famous in that you can go watch videos on YouTube. They bring these, and I would encourage your listeners to do so, or you check it out. It's pretty entertaining. So they bring these students into this room, and they said, or kids, I think it was not students so much, but kids, and sit them at this table, and they do it one at a time. And they tell these kids, and there's a little plate in front of them with a marshmallow on it. And they tell the kids that if you will wait, then we will come back and we'll give you a second marshmallow. But if you eat this one, that's the only marshmallow you get. And then they have video of these kids at this table, and it's incredibly entertaining because you're like almost pulling for them as you're watching them, like salivating, licking their lips. They're antsy at the table. They're wringing their hands. It's like you can see the physical, intensity associated with controlling themselves. And sure enough, everyone falls into, one or two categories. There's those kids that end up eating the marshmallow, and then there's those that wait. And so then 20 years later, or over the next 20 years, Stanford followed all of these children to determine their life outcomes or how well they had done. And so I'm just going to read what the study produced about this.
Okay.
And it said, in follow-up studies on the children when they were older, the researchers found the children who waited tended to have, quote, better life outcomes measured by SAT scores, emotional attainment, body mass index, and other life measures. So their patience or their impatience dramatically affected their behaviors or lifestyles later in life.
Interesting.
Yeah. So self-control. And one of the things I noticed is many people who have a purchase that they regret, they don't have to wait, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years to regret it. Most of the regret associated with a bad purchase occurs within the first 2 weeks of the purchase. And so that's why one of the things I've told people is be patient. And if there's a major purchase, if you can wait 2 weeks, then you'll probably have a better indication of whether you should make the purchase or not. And there are lots of times when someone is committed, convinced they want to buy something, they wait the 2 weeks and then they're totally thrilled that they didn't buy it because they realize in that 2 weeks what a mistake it would have been. And so if you wait that 2 weeks, you can generally end up avoiding much of the regret or that you would, or guilt you would end up experiencing anyway. And the other nice thing that the waiting the 2 weeks does, and it can be more than 2 weeks. In fact, if you super want to be sure, if it's like a major purchase, like a vehicle or a house, you can wait, 4 weeks. And so,
although these days they tell you to, hurry up and make a decision, that house won't be there tomorrow.
Well, yeah, and there can be some truth in that. I was a business major, like I said earlier in the first half of the show, and I took a marketing class, and that's one of the major marketing approaches is causing people to feel like they need it right now and that it's not going to last.
Creating that urgency.
Yeah, and so this won't be here tomorrow. You're going to lose it, and I'll invite people to consider that most of the time when you want to buy something. Have you ever noticed that you can almost always find a good deal? It's not that you wanted to buy this and suddenly there were all these good deals that weren't there before. It's that you want to buy it, but people are successful at marketing and they cause you to feel like you're getting a good deal, even when you're not. I mean, just think about it. Anytime you want to buy something, you almost always are going to be just overwhelmed with marketing that makes it seem like you need to buy this and it's a great deal. And it's just not the case. So there are good deals though. I mean, that's the thing. You could be listening and saying, well, are you saying there's never good deals? No, there are good deals. So then the question becomes, well, how do you determine when something is or isn't a good deal? And that requires doing your research. That's the only way to know. And so when you do your research, when you wait those 2 weeks or 4 weeks, that's when you can do your research to determine whether it's a good deal or not. And I'll give you a story from my life. As we had a van, my family grew, we outgrew the van. We had to move to a 15 passenger van. I don't know anything about vehicles. I'm not handy. I take my vehicle places to get the oil change, things like that. And so we had to get a van, and I just had no familiarity with the market or what was going to be a good price or not. And so I start this Excel spreadsheet, and every day I'm kind of adding the new vehicles that I find to this spreadsheet. And there were times it was definitely tempting, to want to buy something. And then later kind of looking back and realize that probably wasn't a good deal. I'm glad that I didn't buy it. And so I've got this spreadsheet with all the, Ford and Chevy and Dodge, all these different vans, and kind of my own little formula for mileage and year to show me whether it's a good deal. And I'm adding vans every day as they come onto the market in the area to the spreadsheet so that I get to this point where I felt like I had incredible familiarity with what and most stuff is about the same price. And so then suddenly this one day, there's this van that just like shoots off the page in terms of, the price and the miles and the year and in a good way. And so I thought it was a mistake actually. And so I called this gentleman and he said, boy, this is fast. I mean, I just listed that thing and you called me. And I said, well, I'm concerned that this is not accurate, or is this correct? And he said, yes, it is. And I said, can you just kind of tell me the story? And he said, the van belonged to a restaurant. The restaurant wasn't using it. The owner of the restaurant, I'm his friend, and he wanted me to get rid of it. And so he just said, why don't you sell this and ask this amount of money or something? And I don't know the restaurant owner, but he clearly had no idea how much more money he could have made from this van. So it was about 3 hours from us. And I told this guy, I said, okay, well, I like to buy it, and I don't want to drive there if you might sell it out from under me. And he was a nice guy. And he said, if I won't take any other offers, I said, I'll leave right now. I'm on my way with my dad to pick up this van. And so we get there, and I had talked to him only like 2 minutes after he posted this thing. And so he had the next 3-4 hours as I was driving there. And he said, this must be a good deal, because there's like 50, 60 people that have all called in that wanted to buy it. And
wow.
Yeah. And so I said, well, I really appreciate you holding on to it.
You just happened to be the first.
Yeah. I said, well, thank you for, holding on to it for me like you did. And my major point is it was research that allowed me to determine that was a good deal. I wouldn't know that otherwise.
Well, not only that, but you were doing business with a man who clearly had integrity, because he could have sold it from under you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did appreciate him.
Yes,
him doing
definitely.
that. And when I got there, I didn't try to haggle with him. I went there and, gave him the cash for that. And so that's my whole point is research is what allows you to, ensure you are actually getting a good deal, because there are good deals out there. And that is how you can know when to spend money. And generally, I've noticed marriage problems associated with finances. And so, God gives us a spouse. Marriage is a blessing and a gift, and we should talk through things together. And I've seen people have marriage problems from making finances are one of the most common problems in marriage. You have people who, if you're fortunate, you'll have two people who are pretty similar. They have the same view of debt, they have the same view of spending, but often it's not the case. There's usually one person that's more frugal than the other, and one person that's more comfortable spending money.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that's why it's important. If you can talk together, then you can often, those people, the strengths accompany the weaknesses, and they can complement each other to make sure that the purchases you're actually buying are good ones, and you're not being given over to that one person's dominant spending problem. Exactly.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that story. And from that, I want to kind of I want it to go into the topic of debt, because I think when most people buy a car, like you said, you gave them cash, but when most people buy a car, they have a loan. So what do you think about debt?
Good. I'm really glad to have this opportunity to talk about this. So I'm going to set mortgage debt for a home aside and say that all other debt categorically should be avoided. Credit card debt, and if you use a credit card that you pay off each month just to build your credit, that's one thing. But to me, that's not really debt, because you're paying it off before it accrues interest. Automobiles, I think, are one of the worst investments that people can make, new ones at least. There's nothing where you can lose money that quickly except like at a poker table. I mean, you've got to go gamble in a casino to lose money as quickly as you do when you drive that new vehicle off the lot, because it immediately, decreases in value. And I think people have heard that many times, but they still continue to buy new vehicles. Now,
I think people like the idea of having a new car, a new house, a new building, that you just, you got to decide what's on the floor and what's on the ceiling and whatever it is. That newness is so attractive that people are willing to pay premium for it.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I would say is if you want a new vehicle, you can buy a used vehicle that's still new and that it doesn't have many miles. You can go buy a used vehicle that's a 2022 or 2021. That's still a new vehicle. It's just you're not the first owner of it. And so if that's and I'm because I said I'm not handy and I don't know how to work on vehicles, I will, even though I think I'm pretty frugal, I still try to buy newer vehicles or vehicles with lower miles, because I don't want to break down on the side of the road with my family and have to try to get under it and fix whatever's wrong.
You can't carry 9 children.
Yeah. And so I'm definitely opposed to debt. I think it's one of the biggest hindrances to people financially. And I get why it seems so attractive. You can buy things with money that you don't have. And so I'm opposed to all debt except for investment debt on properties. Okay. And now if we briefly talk about that first, people are convinced they can't buy a house with cash. And I just want to say that's not true. I'm not saying you have to buy a house with cash, but I am saying we've seen some people, and you want to hear some stories. So I'll share two of them. There's a gentleman in my church, and he gave me permission to use his name because I put it in my book, so I'm sure I can use it here in the show. His name's Robert Cunningham, his wife Katie, and they had 5 kids at the time, and they're living in this, I'm not joking, a broken down motorhome while they put that on the property while he's building the house there. And so as he got the money, then he continued building the house. And so he built that house with cash. We know another couple, and they had 7 kids in 1 bedroom, and while they were saving up the money for their house. And so there's a couple, they kind of lived in their parents' attic, and they didn't do anything. They didn't spend anything. They didn't go anywhere, for I think only 2 or 3 years until they saved up enough money to buy their first house with cash too. Now, I think what people think is they have to buy their dream house. And the approach I would recommend is you buy the first house, and then you save more money, and then you sell that house, and it can be in stages like that. Maybe you live in that house for 5-10 years, and your dream house is the house down the road. You don't have to jump right into your dream house when you're 20, 25 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
But if you,
well, I know people who've also downsized, they've bought a house, it had a lot of equity, they sold it and then bought something else with the equity. And so they had no payments at that point. Or somebody who maybe took a 30-year mortgage and made it a 15-year mortgage. So there are ways to accelerate that paying off process without creating more debt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if people are going to get debt, I would say mortgage debt is the debt to have, because it's a debt that can appreciate or increase. It doesn't always. I mean, we've seen that when in 2007, 2008, when who knows how many people were upside down. And actually the number of people who were upside down continued not just into 2010, but even 2015, there were still plenty of people who were upside down. So it's not a guarantee that every time you buy a house, it's always going to appreciate. But that's one other time when research is really good, because you can look for those times that houses are cheaper.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you coming on today, sharing your expertise, your knowledge, and talking a little bit about your book and giving our listeners some wonderful tidbits of information. I have one other question for you that I like to ask all my guests is, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self if you were to look back at when you were 20? What advice would you give them, knowing what you know today?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think I wish I would have started following the Lord earlier. I wish someone would have shared the gospel with me or would have pointed me toward church earlier. And so I wish I would have started reading the Bible, which contains, the principles, whether for finances or for marriage, that I think allows us to have, successful relationships or steward our money well. And so if I could go back, I'd look at my, non-religious secular self and say, hey, your life, you could avoid a lot of problems and have a lot more peace and joy if you were to, throw yourself into a relationship with Christ earlier in life. I did later, but I wish it would have been earlier. So.
Well, I really do appreciate you sharing that. And once again, let's go ahead and share your information so that our listeners can get in touch with you and a copy of your book.
Good. Thanks, Fazia. So my book is Your Finances God's Way, a biblical guide to making the best use of your money. People can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. And then Your Marriage God's Way is my marriage book, published last year, biblical guide to Christ-centered relationships. And then my website, scottlapierre.org, that's where people can reach out to me. I have a free gift to your listeners, a free marriage, more like a booklet there that they can download. And I'd love to hear from them. There's a contact page there if they have questions, or I can pray for them in any way. Again, that's scottlapierre.org. And I believe you'll put the website in the show notes.
Yes, we will actually have a banner on our website with your website information, so they can definitely access that. So I really want to thank you, Scott, for being on the show today. And if you're looking to get in touch with me, you can feel free to go to my website, executivefunctioncoachaz.com. Once again, you can subscribe to Executive Function magazine there. Our next issue comes out July 10th, so it's coming up very quickly. If you want to get a copy of that, make sure you go subscribe. It's a 2-step process. Once you subscribe, you'll receive an email. You need to confirm that email, otherwise the email from my end will not go out to you. And if you'd like to see a copy of what Scott and I did today, a behind the scenes version, you can go to our YouTube channel. You can also listen to the podcast at a later date on the website as well. So we have lots of options for you. And once again, I want to give a quick shout out to all our listeners. I really appreciate you listening to us. And if there's any questions that you have, feel free to go to our website, and we would love to hear from you. Once again, executivefunctioncoachaz.com, and we'll be happy to chat with you guys next time, and have a wonderful week.
And we're all clear. Great job today. Good show.
All right. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, great. Thanks, Fozzie. Well, I look forward to getting the social graphics, social media graphics, and marketing stuff, and doing what I can to promote the show.
So I will send you an e-card, and hang on one second. Let me just stop this recording.